Good afternoon to all team members from JHS as well as invitees. I think today is really another special day for us in our Excellencia series. We really have the most renowned of speakers, but I will come to that later. First, I will talk to you about the subject. The subject is audit communications, telling the audit story effectively. So here I just want to go back a little bit. I think we've all been reading a lot about storytelling and the art of storytelling. But what really is storytelling? I think for me, and I'm sure for many of you, storytelling is when, we used to have our mothers putting us to sleep at night, or preferably the grandmothers, because they always had the more interesting stories. And the kind of stories which they used to tell and the manner in which they used to tell those stories, I think has stayed with most of us throughout our lives. And even when you grow up, if someone tells you a story well, then definitely it has a huge impact. So I will now come to a speaker who's going to tell us how to tell a story well. Mrs. Nandita Parekh is a second rank holder at the intermediate and a gold medalist at the final examination of Chartered Accountancy, having the distinction of being the first woman to top the CA final exam. This was not the first time she did it. She did the same thing in her BCom and MCom. After securing a second rank in BCom, she leapt ahead and got a first rank in the MCom. Then went on to do her MBA from the USA and worked with Coopers & Lybrand, an international accounting firm in their Chicago office from 86 to 88. She was a partner of C&K & Associates LLP, and before that she had led the audit and consulting practices of Messrs. A.J. Shah & Company, specializing in internal audit and risk advisory services. She is a regular faculty at professional seminars, training programs, MBA schools, and topics such as practice management, risk management, etc. I've had the pleasure of listening to her more than a couple of times, and it is absolutely a pleasure to listen to her. She is also pioneering the cause of women chartered accountants and how they need a better work-life balance and how they could be supported in restarting their professional careers if they have to take a break for any reason. She's been actively involved with the BCAS, which you've all heard of. She's been a member of the managing committee from 2005 to 2015, as well as held the post of honorary treasurer of the society in the year 2009. She's been instrumental in designing internal audit studies, a long duration course on internal audit conducted by the BCAS, and she currently co-chairs the internal audit committee. She is a person who is a specialist in practice management and is a regular speaker on many seminars on management of professional services. I think all of us are absolutely looking forward to listening to this really gripping speaker. So Nandita Ben, over to you. We look forward to listening to your story today. Thank you. Thank you.
Okay. Is my screen visible?
Yes, ma'am, it is. Thank you so much.
And I'm audible?
Yes, you're very clearly audible. Thank you.
Okay. So let me start with one observation that any organization which can collect 100 people to listen to a talk which is not strictly technical on a Monday afternoon at 3 o'clock, I think they're investing their time and efforts in the right place. I'm sure JHS will go places. It has already gone places, but I do understand the commitment of the organization to training and development. I am truly honored to be part of the JHS Excellencia series. In fact, when I accepted the invitation, I had not heard the previous talk. Then I happened to hear the talk given by Mr. Shailesh Haribhakti. I almost drafted a mail saying that I think you got the wrong person for this series because the kind of speakers you have been getting are of a different league altogether. But having given the opportunity, I thought through and I said that no, this is my chance to say that yes, there is a different story in a different way to be told by somebody whose perspective and experience has been vastly different from people like Shailesh Haribhakti, who are legends unto themselves. So with this, I open this dialogue. Now, when I say audit communication and report writing, my first question is that this is an August audience whose time is precious. Whatever the number of people multiplied by 1.5 hours is the investment you are making in this session. What should I be sharing that is not already out there? And the problem that all of us have is not that there are things, information, YouTube videos not out there, that there is too much of it already. So when I looked at this, I realized that the internet is full of articles, presentations, videos on how to write better, how to be more effective in our report structure, in our content, in the flow, how to improve the related communication. So the how part of it has been covered in many different sessions, many different literatures, many different seminars. What has really not been covered often enough is that why is it that communication stops short of being effective? Or what really stops us from communicating and being understood by the person to whom we are communicating? And more so in terms of creating the necessary impact and nudging the audience, whoever it is, to bring about the change that we really want them to bring. So the session is really not about how to write better reports or how to communicate or how to conduct better meetings. It is about the why, that what do you really need to do at a deeper level to make sure that whatever you write, not just audit reports, and whatever you speak has the quality of excellence attached to it. So this is where I would start the session. Then I said that people are just back from a weekend. They are giving me time on a Monday morning. Believe me, when I was in this position, I would be very reluctant to block Monday for my team. I would do it on a Thursday or a Friday, sometimes on a Saturday morning. So I'm really honored with this. So I said that we need to really make this session as interesting as possible, as entertaining if you may, and that is how I structured the session. Now, when I look at the why of the reports, I find that why our reports are not effective. The superficial issue is very often that it was not written well, there was not enough time, or the person was not very conversant with the language, or he or she did not know the standard structure that the firm has developed. But these are the low-hanging fruits to address. What I really feel that our reports tend to be ineffective when our work is not driven by requisite knowledge or appropriate skills, when it is focused on completion of assignment rather than creating an impact, or better still, generating the desired response, when it is not aligned to the purpose of our assignment. There is always a purpose for which the assignment has been given to us. There is something that we need to deliver. When there is a misalignment between what is the purpose and how our team is guided, there is definitely an ineffective report that comes as a result, or it is done in a lackluster, mundane manner without serious commitment to the work or the service quality, which I know is not a case with reputed firms like JHS. At a personal level, when we are not clear about what we want to convey. So when there is lack of clarity, where there is confusion, where we have not come to a conclusion, obviously what we convey is also the chaos and confusion, where we are lost in data and we have not gathered enough insights to make a difference. So what we end up sharing is a lot of data, but no insights, where we have not formed the habit of writing and speaking with eloquence and brevity, both. So it is very important that we learn to say what we need to say in a short time, but with the necessary finesse. And this only can come out of practice. And we have spent so much time in gathering data and performing tests that we have left too little time to create the story or to really join the dots. So these were some of the whys which I thought that we really need to address as a team, right from the top of the organization to the entry level or to the budding leaders, as I would call them. So yes, packaging is important only if the content is worthy. So as Steve Jobs can say that packaging can be a theater, it can create a story. But you and I know that in a theater, whatever may be the initial 3 minutes, we will walk out of the theater after 15 minutes if the story doesn't hold us, if there is not enough content in the story. So that is what I say, that the content and the packaging have always to be looked at together. Good content gets lost if the packaging is not right, but too much focus on the packaging without adequate content also does not create lasting goodwill. We will be called once or twice, but that's about it. So that is what I really look at, that my content and my packaging should match and match up at every level. So what I have learned is that when we have a team, the first thing we need to make sure is that the team is capable of delivering content. So we teach audit, we teach standards, we ask them to take certification exams so that the learning gets consolidated. We teach analytics, we read audit literature, we have in-house discussions. But the next thing and the next thing, we leave it for a later date. So we say that when a person becomes manager and senior manager, and he's then required to present to a larger group, to a set of functional managers, or to a first year audit committee, or to a senior management team, at that time we suddenly find that the person's English is not good enough, or the ability to make last minute changes in a PowerPoint presentation is not there, or there are so many customized tools which are available to make a presentation interesting, but that person has not learned, nor does the team have this. So we do end up doing a lot of things which kind of temporarily bridge the gap. We, in the earlier time, I used to say, I would look at the big four reports, I would look at my reports, and I said that, if only I had a spiral binding machine, I would be able to compete with them. That was my naivety, but that is what I thought, because really what created an impression was the quality of paper and the kind of printing that the larger firms could use, which was not even accessible or affordable to the medium size or to the local Indian firms. Today, even a specialist support to convert a presentation or a report or article to a professional appearing article is very easy. So that is the next level, but we need to make sure that the team trains on the presentation skills much before they're required to make external presentations. But the key question, which I must admit, I started addressing this at a later part of my career, that you really focus on why. That, is my team driven? Are they wanting to excel in every meeting? Do they want to walk out of every meeting with pride and with appreciation? Do they want to make it a habit that every time we go and we are given an audience, if a 5-minute time is allotted to us, which happens in many audit committees, we have enough to say in 5 minutes that my audience will ask us to wait for another 20. If that is the focus, or that is the purpose with which we drive ourselves and our teams, then the first and the second automatically fall in place. So this is where I really want to focus on today's short meeting. I do hope to cover a lot of ground in this next hour or so, but in a very different way. So the session structure, as I said, that how can I make it interesting? So I said that I would be sharing stories. I would be sharing some anecdotes from our lives, anecdotes that we all can relate to. And to make it a little different, I will also share a poem. So that is the session structure. Every session has to have an objective of the audience and objective of the speaker. My objectives for this session are to I want to leave you with a thought that learning can be a lot of fun, so that learning doesn't appear to be a compulsory thing that the team has to do whenever a notice comes from Mr. Husefa Kaka. And the second is that no matter where you are in your audit communication journey, it is always possible to shift the needle to a lesser or a greater degree, depending upon your motivation and depending upon your purpose in the organization. So these are the two thoughts that I would like to share, that this is my objective. At the end, I am sure you must be having a way of taking feedback on each session. For my session, please ask the audience whether the learning was fun and whether at the end you feel empowered to feel that yes, the next meeting and the one after, the way I will communicate, the way I will present my report will be a little better than what I have been doing in the past. So I start with the very first story, and this is a story of the shepherd. Very simple story. So once upon a time, and some of you may have heard it already, because there are not that many stories written on audit. So once upon a time, there was a shepherd. He was looking after his sheep on the side of a deserted road. He was sitting, you know how shepherds are, playing his flute, looking over in the meadows in a very blissful state. Suddenly, a brand new Porsche pulls up, and the driver, dressed in the latest branded apparel, the Armani suit, the Gucci shoes, the Ray-Ban glasses, the Jaguar wristwatch, walks in and disturbs the shepherd and says, "If I can tell you how many sheep you have out there, will you give me one of them?" The shepherd looks at the young man, then looks at the large flock of grazing sheep and replies, "Okay." So the young man parks his car, takes out his laptop, connects with certain satellites, looks at certain pictures, images, does some calculations, and after a few minutes tells him that, "Mr. Shepherd, you have 1,586 sheep." The shepherd is impressed and says, "That's correct, you can have your sheep." The young man takes one animal and puts the animal in the car. Then the shepherd looks at him and says that, "If I guess your profession correctly, will you give back my animal to me?" So the young man says, "Yes, why not?" The shepherd says that, "Well, you must be the auditor." This young man is aghast and says, "How the hell did you come to know?" So he says, "Well, firstly, you came to me without being called, without ever being wanted. Second is, you charge me a fee to tell me something that I already knew. And third is that you claim to, but you know very little about my business. Now, can I please have my dog back, which you have taken in the car?" So this is the story which amuses me, and it makes me think that, is this my story? Can my story be any different? So this is the story which I will share the presentation. You will have the story. It's courtesy the CA Club India. And what I really want to emphasize when he says, "Now can I have my dog back?" It is a very telling tale of a lot of us who go to very specialized industries and try to teach them about their business. So this is where I would say that what are the lessons we would like to take from the shepherd story, which will make our communication better. So one is, are you an uninvited guest? How do you make yourself welcome? How do you consider adding value? Do you have network? Do you have friends on the other side of the table? Uh, do you create an atmosphere and the quality of conversations which make you interesting enough to be called for, not just for formal meetings, but for informal discussions? So this is the first question. And this is where we need to start, that whenever I am a wanted guest, my conversation flows easier. I am less conscious of what I have to say, and I also commit to the conversation more, because when you feel welcome, you always perform better. The second is, are we telling them what they already know? I have sat through many presentations, uh, and I have seen very often auditors presenting the first 9 slides are just a copy of the quarterly results of the organization. They just, now the audit committee is sitting there. They have to review this quarterly presentation. The quarterly presentations are, the quarterly numbers have been made available to them. Is it really worth my while to share those 9 slides telling them exactly what has come out of their system, or what has already been shared? Can I use those 9 slides to bring something new, something contemporary, or something about what has transpired in the world outside between the last meeting and this, which I have to bring to their attention, which is likely to be of interest to them? Are there trends which they could have missed out? Are there patterns? Are there deviations which appear small but which could have a larger implication? So, is there, what am I communicating? And in terms of the quantum of mind time that I'm taking from my audience, what is the percentage I am giving them something new? And what is the percentage I'm of the time that I'm actually telling them what they already know? So if this percentage can be changed or shifted in favor of something new, we start telling, making our voice heard better. And finally, do we really know the business? Now, I feel that as an auditor or an advisor, we need to understand the business dynamics, but we cannot claim to know the business better than our auditee. But however, we can claim is an understanding of areas which are in our domain of specialization: risk, controls, compliance issues, fraud alerts, governance, the changing scenario, technology. These are the things we can genuinely claim to know better, or we can claim to have better, wider knowledge on these issues. So when we approach a meeting with humility, that there are some things you certainly know better than me, but I feel that if there are a few things which I know which you may not have paid attention to, together we can create a success story which individually neither of us can do. That is when the story becomes interesting. Because when you have a one person theater, that theater requires an extraordinary actor. But when you have multiple people in a play, each one holds up the other in terms of performance. That is the attitude with which we need to go. If the attitude is right, our communication becomes effective. Um, and pardon my saying that, but very often I have seen that a 23-year-old is asked by his partner to make a presentation in a large forum, and the person talks with the conviction of a senior partner or somebody who has seen 2 decades of the world. I think that who is talking and whether it is appropriate for a person with of that age and experience is also very important. So there are, in any presentation, there is a conversation which the senior must have, and there is a conversation which we must allow our team member to hold. But the two veins should not mix up, and that is also very critical. Now I will move to my second story. So at this point, I would say that when I look at a shepherd, it's, the story is funny, surely, but it is also very telling. And there are lessons that we must remember from this story. The next story is my favorite. As I said, facts not validated. I am an auditor at the end, but it is a good story and it will do us good. And hence I thought that I should share the story. So you would recognize this picture and you would find it strange as to the kind of place uh, president and the first lady of that time are eating at. So this is a story that one night President Obama and his wife Michelle decided to do something out of the ordinary. And they said that during the time when we were dating, we used to go to this small casual dine out places and have food. Why don't we do that? So they decided to go, and they were dining out at a very small, casual, good restaurant. Of course, with their requisite security, plainclothes security around. Now, after they were seated, the owner of the restaurant asked the president's Secret Service chief if he could have a word with Michelle in private. Michelle, the first lady. The chief found that that should be safe, and he said yes. So Michelle and the owner of the restaurant met at a side table and they had a private conversation. When she returned to the table, President Obama, curious, said, "What is it that he wanted to share with you?" So Michelle, with a little bit of a blush, said, "Well, I didn't even realize," he said, "we went to school, we went to college together. And during our teenage years, he was madly in love with me, unknown to me. He said, I could never tell you that, but I thought that you must now know, and I wish you well." President Obama, with his characteristic sense of humor, told Michelle that, well, if you had married him, just imagine, you would have been the owner of this lovely restaurant. But the story doesn't end there. There is a response that Michelle Obama gave, which I would want all of you to remember. She said, no, if I had married him, he would now be the president of the United States. This is what I call conviction. This is what I call presence of mind. This is what I call knowing the role that I play in somebody else's life, be it personal life or corporate life. So this is a story which is very dear to me. It has stayed with me for a long, long time. So the lessons that I draw from this is that, do we have the confidence and conviction that we are here to make a positive difference to the organization we audit? Is our focus on fees? Is our focus on completion? Is our focus on our timeline? Or is our focus on making a difference? Because the moment we focus on making a difference, the tone of our conversation changes and the manner of our reporting is never accusative then. I also say that if you feel you are not making a difference, or the organization is not ready to make the difference to themselves, to implement some of the very clear recommendations that you are making, give it a patient try. But if you feel that your presence cannot make a difference, seriously think of leaving. It's a big statement, perhaps coming from a retired chartered accountant, I would admit. But I do say that if your audit report year after year come up with the same findings, with the same deviations, with the same kind of errors, with the same kind of technology gaps, we must have the courage to say that for the next year, please reread last year's report, but allow me to do work where I can make a larger difference. So this is something which I would like to leave as a thought. The second is, what are we doing to give visibility to our work? What is our engagement with senior management? What are the refreshing new stories that we are taking to them? Are we missing opportunities to drive home the relevance of our work and the work that our profession does in the corporate framework? These are, I do know that various members of your firm, of JHS, have taken leading professional roles, not only uh, uh, to bring goodwill and create a brand image for JHS, but to do larger good for the profession. And that is really something that each one of you should think, that how would you make sure that your profession is valued, your work is valued, and from that flows your engagement-based relevance. A few things which I always followed, that whenever I attended an audit committee, and some of them tended to be fairly senior, I would always go 15 minutes earlier. It is time I needed to settle in and find my comfort. But it also gave me that window of 5 minutes, 10 minutes to the independent director who walked in early, to the senior management person or to the company secretary who was already there. And before a meeting, it's a very precious time that we can't miss out on. We cannot then go and talk of the weather, or we cannot, there has to be something really interesting and relevant that we are able to bring into that conversation at that time. So this is one of the things. The other thing which I did was, very often the audit committee does not have the practice of calling the functional heads into the meeting. So sometimes some reports are discussed which have a bearing on a lot of functional heads, and all of them are not present at the meeting. So when I finished the meeting, I made it a point to go back to the functional head to share what transpired at the meeting, because for them it is very important to have a closure of the loop, because they have worked hard with us to bring the report to a closure, to agree on certain action points, and to understand how they're making those changes will be reviewed by their senior management or by the audit committee. So when you take that time to go back after an audit committee, after an audit is complete, to give to close that information loop, it becomes the conversation becomes two ways, because they know that you are bringing to them something which otherwise they will have to wait for a few days to come in terms of minutes or to come in terms of directions. So this is something which I would like to share and leave it as a thought. The last thing is conviction. That, I find very often that there are very critical observations in an audit report. But at the end, when it comes to rating, when it comes to calling a spade, we go on a back foot. We hesitate. So this is where I would say, sit with your team, sit with your audit team, discuss, debate, argue, go back to the working papers, go back to the desk, in whichever way. But go to a meeting with 100% conviction, because the conviction will speak not in terms of your words but your body language, and the audit committee will view both. It is becoming more difficult in the virtual space, but yes, we will all learn. We have all learned in these times. So this is also something which I would like to leave. Now I would come to a little different, little very simple part of some anecdote. Some, we've talked about a shepherd. We've talked about the past president of the US, and we know that neither of them is where we are. I'm talking of now a childhood puzzle that very often we went through. So here's the time for a riddle. So there was a 27-seater bus going from Nariman Point to Sahara Plaza complex in Andheri East. Guess where? At the starting point, please read through, 12 people got in. At the next stop, which is Marine Drive, 7 people got out, 3 got in. At Babulnath, 7 got in and no one got out. At Pedder Road, 9 people got in and 2 got out. Remember, you have to answer a question at the end. At Worli, 5 people got in, 5 got out. At Shivaji Park, 6 people got in. At Santa Cruz, 8 people got in, 10 got out. And finally, the bus landed at Sahara Plaza complex, being the last bus, and the entire bus got empty. So I'm leaving this slide for a few seconds more. I'm sure the more enterprising of you have taken a screenshot so that you can answer. And now I will ask you the question. So in the childhood, what the trick question, because we would go on counting on our fingertips the number of people who have come in and who have got out and come in and got out, and we had a number ready. So the question, that person would say, how many stops did the bus make? And it stumped most people who had not heard of the riddle earlier. Then the next question would be, for what duration? This is my question to you. The bus had more people than its sitting capacity. Anybody has that answer? The next is there a missing data point, a very obvious missing data point? My next question is, what is the maximum number of women traveling at any point in this bus? The second last question is, how many people got out at the last stop? I'm sure that a lot of people will have this answer handy. And finally, how many of these were team members of JHS? So now I'm taking you back to the question, to the earlier slide, to say that, what is the missing data point? Is anybody able to tell me what is the missing data point? Is an unmute option there for the participants?
Yes, there is an unmute. Riddhi, you want to say something?
Yes, sir. Am I audible enough?
Yes.
Yeah. So, ma'am, there are many missing points. The one of which is there is no bifurcation as to women or men here.
Little louder, please.
There is no bifurcation as to women and men here. It just gives information about the number of counts of the passengers.
Correct.
And also where you asked about the duration aspect is missing here. We just know that who came in and who got out.
Yes.
So this is also something we do not have. And
very true. There is also something which is very obvious. If you see at Shivaji Park, everywhere else, in fact, we have said at Babulnath stop, 7 people got in and no one got out. At Shivaji Park, 6 people got in, but there is no information on who got out. Now, if I say that if I had changed the order of the slides, and if I said these are the answers that I am expecting, would you have been able to stop me at my second bullet and say that, hello, you want to know how many women? Where is the data? Or to say that you divide the team members and make sure that each one is tracking one important variable correctly. So where I'm coming from, that very often a lot of work that our team does is not with an eye on the report or not an eye with what is critical to this report. So a lot of work that we do of calculating, mentally holding things in our mind, doing calculation, elaborate Excel sheets, they don't serve the purpose of providing interesting inputs to our report. Not only that, at the fag end of the work, we realized that there was certain critical data which we never even asked for, and hence certain insights which would have been very valuable to the organization, we are unable to give. So this is what I say, that when do you really start thinking of a report? At the end of the audit work? In that case, your 80% of your efforts will only give 20% of the results. Somewhere in the middle of the execution or the day you start the audit. So efforts expended on the audit without an eye, without clearly knowing that these are the valuable insights I want to go with. And I want to make sure that when we start looking at the data, we are capturing the right trends, the right detailing. We stop the moment we have a conclusion or an insight which is convincing enough, and we are 100% sure that this is an insight I want to take, we don't need to go on auditing more and greater samples, but we can start focusing on the reports. What I find is that the report which was made one slide or one observation at a time ends up being better than a report which is made at the end of an audit period, going back and forth on Excel spreadsheets and versions and looking at the work papers and sitting with the team members and pulling team members from different schedules which they have already got re-allotted to. So think about this. This is a story of many of us at many points. Whatever I'm presenting, I am not saying that this is what I could achieve during my work life. Some of it we could to some extent, some of it remained on my wishful list, but this is what I would like to share with you. The next thing is becoming comfortable about uncomfortable conversations. So what happens when the business is doing good, when we have a good rating at the end of an audit that our rating model comes up with, it is very comfortable for us because it is like the report card that have you got an A+, then there is a different feel to that open house discussion. But if you say that no, there are concerns, that there is a serious control lapse or there are fraud alerts which are far too many to be comfortable, or there are interpersonal issues in the organization which does not make to a good governance here, we become uncomfortable. And that is where I find that, it is not how well a good report with a good conclusion or with an acceptable conclusion that is presented. The real issue in presentation is that how well are we able to present that which is not very palatable. And for that, we need to have an unbiased view. We should have accurate information, because when there is a negative finding that we are coming up with, our groundwork has to be even more solid than otherwise. We must have some friends in the forum to whom we are presenting who are convinced that if we are bringing something to the table, it would not be without adequate homework, and who would stand by us in case there is an argument, a debate, or a confrontation. We have to develop the knack of presenting negative finding in a positive tone. Our intention should always be a genuine desire to offer support and solutions. And we should have, at the end of the day, courage to lose an assignment. It is then that we will be able to be honest, authentic, and we will be able to handle uncomfortable conversations and uncomfortable reports with greater ease. As my friend Satish Shenoy told in one of the seminars, which I still that there was a serious lapse. There was a serious lapse in an audit in an organization. The audit committee asked the internal auditor that how come you never told us? So he said, of course I mentioned it. Please see line 5 of slide 32 in the presentation. Now, if it is a serious observation, should it be hidden in line 5 of slide 32, or it should be there right at the top? So these are some of the things that we need to find comfort with, become comfortable with uncomfortable conversation. And this is something which I would say that there is this gentleman and he is asking you, am I fat? Now, absolutely correct responses. I'm giving you 3 responses for you to see how the responses, each one is correct, technically correct, but there is a very different flavor. So one response is, you most definitely you are obese beyond doubt. This is one way of presenting something which is uncomfortable. Another is, you are not fat, but you are just short. There is a height weight ratio. So if you just manage to become 6 inches taller, then your weight is absolutely right for that height. No, this is technically correct. It is very sound, but is it practical? Is it feasible for an adult man? And finally, you are currently overweight, but with discipline and professional guidance, you can be in better shape and get fit. It is a response to the same question. How do we train each one of us not only to write in the way the third observation is written, but to think in those terms? Because what we write reflects how we think. So this is the connection that I would really like you to think through. Full and fair reporting. We sometimes make the mistake of playing safe, being over diplomatic. We are trying to please too many people with differing agenda in the forum, giving comfort when we should actually be raising concern. We are providing assurance sometimes when our work suggests that there is a high alert required, or conversely, crying wolf when the deviations found are acceptable, but we think that when we cry wolf, we get noticed more. All this we can avoid when we rehearse our presentations, where an independent audience from within our firm, a peer reviewer, can honestly tell us how the presentation is coming across. When we review our report, very often a report is written or assimilated and issued. There is no time to do a quiet review with a cup of tea at going through as to from a reader's perspective, that who is my audience, how is the management likely to perceive this report, and how is the audit committee likely to understand the report. When I am able to look at my report from an auditor's point of view, a primary auditor's point of view, and the governance point and the governing council point of view, I will find things in my report which are not making sense. And finally, irrespective of the time which has been allotted to us or promised to us, today the world is very short. There is a serious scarcity of attention. So if you are asked to conclude in one page what you have to say, or tell your story in 5 minutes, what are the issues and insights that you would share? And are you sure that those issues and insights are prominently displayed and not hidden somewhere in the report? So these are some of the issues which I have come across, that, we've never missed out on reporting something which had to be told. But have we given adequate emphasis? Have we given it the proper place in our report? And have we given enough conversation time to that finding? Remains to be seen. This is something which I do feel makes a lot of difference. And role of the leader, it's a very beautiful this thing, that knowledge is in terms of data points. What is gathered for us, what comes. With experience, we are able to join the dots to tell the story as is, but with a little creativity and wider perspective, wider, or as I say, a worldly perspective, we are able to come up with a creative solution. So the first one, the gathering of complete and full information, is handled at a certain at a certain level in the team. The joining the dots is done at a little senior level, where the facts are presented in a cohesive manner so that certain patterns, certain trends, certain insights emerge. And thereafter, the leadership or the most experienced people on the team, doesn't necessarily have to be the most senior, but the most knowledgeable, would develop a solution which appears easy, which appears obvious when the solution is provided, and which my auditee feels encouraged to implement. So this is something which also, so what I'm going to leave is the way I've done the presentation. It is very easy to take printouts and put it on your board so that you remember this periodically. So now I come to the next point, that, we feel that when a person gets promoted to the next level, he will overnight develop the new set of skills that that level demands. That is not how it happens. So I remember that, I studied in a school which transitioned from Gujarati to English over my school years. So I started in Gujarati up to the 5th standard. We studied English in at a higher level, or at how it would be taught in an English medium school. But we studied other subjects in Gujarati and transitioned mathematics in English from 5th standard, and other subjects by 7th standard. And by 8th standard, we were a fully English medium school. Now, one of the things which our teachers insisted, that when you speak, whether at home or in the school, use both the languages for which you are being trained, which is Gujarati and English. And of course, at that time, then the Hindi got added. And our school was known that anybody who studied from our school will have comfort and appreciation for multiple languages with equal flair. So this is where I say that if someone who always speaks in vernacular language, will he be able to present fluently in English? No, the change has to be made at an early stage. Everybody doesn't need to be fluent in English from day one, but that fluency will not happen overnight. Someone who does not talk to a larger audience even for 2 minutes, suddenly if he is asked to uh, uh, sorry, there is a typo there in the second bullet, apologies for that. Will that person be able to hold attention if the time comes? Someone who uses slang in normal conversation, people send this uh, messages on WhatsApp, etc., which uses all these abbreviations. I keep wondering that the half minute that they spend using those abbreviations, where do they use that half minute? So when you get used to using slang, will you be eloquent and correct in your public talks? Or somebody who is specializes in copy paste of all reports. I have seen people who will take 4 good reports of the department and create the report entirely out of copy pasting somebody's observation, somebody's cause, somebody's this thing, and the report is ready. Now, if they have to do a brand new engagement, a different kind of engagement for a different kind of industry, will they be able to build a report from scratch, a report which does not have an existing structure? Or somebody who looks up social media 6 times is an understatement, in an hour, will that person ever be able to listen carefully to what the client is saying, or what a teacher is saying, or what a trainer is saying, or what the unspoken words are trying to convey? Now, these are some of the things I really want to look at. What are the habits that our teams are forming? Are the habits right? Can we focus on forming the relevant habits which automatically create great communication and hence very effective reports? So I say that yes, we need to ensure that for our teams, we have an expanded vocabulary, we have good oratory skills, writing is made fun, saying it in short comes naturally, communicating without words is encouraged. Focus and attention is not lost at the top of a hat. Reading is an integral part and visualization comes naturally. Technology absorption is something which happens on a daily basis. And how do you achieve? Is there a way of doing all this? And this is a thought I would like to leave for the leadership team and the HR team, that, when people are, when the in-office work starts, there will always be in our profession busy season and lean season, or there are gaps during the season where people have time. Can we encourage people to use their coffee breaks to play Pictionary? Can we arrange for debates and elocution competitions? Can we have a tell me a story competition? Narrate in 1 minute. I will read something, I will read a story. Can you tell it in 1 minute? Dumb charades. We've all played this, communicating without words. A no phone zone within the office, or better still, encourage meditation. Create a book club where empowering books are read and discussed. A movie club. I think that is a great way to learn visualization, through movie club, through YouTube, through videos, through TED Talks. And a hackathon to come up with technology solutions. Now, these are some of the more interesting ways, because if I tell somebody that please learn 10 new words and come tomorrow, impossible that the person will actually be able to do it for beyond 4 or 5 days. But if I say that yes, let us have a Pictionary competition in the office, or let us form a book club where we read a book and we discuss it. I think these are interesting ways to ensure that people will be able to learn the very important art of communication in a way that they don't even think that they are learning something. So one book, if at all you look at starting a book club or look at discussing, is what I am very impressed with, is a book called Atomic Habits. I'm sure many of you would have read this. What it says is that people feel that gold medalists are born overnight, that there is this flash of brilliance which occurs, which creates a Nobel Prize. No, it is the product of daily habits, the small shift that is made on a day-to-day basis, which brings up a compounding effect. So that is why when we want to write good reports, there is no one-day workshop, there is no 5-day this thing which can help us create a good report. Yes, those that will provide cues, that will provide encouragement, that will provide a directional shift. But the journey is what we need to walk. The journey is what we need to take as each of us. And finally, I would end with a poem. Some of you may have read it. It has been published as a blog of PCA. This is a poem which narrates my story as an internal auditor. I'm sure many of you will be able to relate to this so that I can finish in time. I can leave time for some question answers or some sharing that any of you would like to do. So this is a poem about the transformation of an internal auditor, would apply to a statutory auditor or to other advisors also to some extent. And here's how it goes. It says, I sat in a corner. I think we can switch off the presentation at this stage. Okay, so I will put the poem for those who may not be able to hear clearly. I sat in a corner, quiet and meek, ready to give assistance that no one would seek. A one-person department, I was the internal auditor, asked to review vouchers, to find petty faults like a class monitor. Now tell me, anybody ever loved a class monitor? And invited to the audit committee because the law said so. I was given full 5 minutes to summarize the entire year on the go. My CEO said then one day, something changed. My CEO said, we are in trouble. Sales are dipping. Competition is severe. I look at the vouchers, nothing more I do. I said, I'm just an internal auditor. What can I do? Then came my mentor who took me aside. Wise words she spoke that made me realize you are the internal auditor with your canvas so wide. Be fearless and fair. You will have insights to emphasize. I left my lonely corner and started looking around across functions and activities, and oh, there was so much to be found. I met with many folks in cabins and on shop floors, no longer to find their faults, but to ease their woes. No longer to find their faults, but to ease their woes. Analyzed the sales, studied the competition, read research reports, and understood the global trends. Armed with my insights with the CEO I met, if you don't change your ways, your business is dead. Angered by my words, yet worried to the core, I got in an audience with the CEO and with many more. Technology is changing our worlds in ways unseen. Today's thieves don't break the locks, they enter through your screen. Opportunities are many and so are the threats. May I take you through some gaps that must surely make you fret? And allow me to show you the ways to succeed with risks and controls and culture and ethics. Invited to the boardroom no longer as a pest, I laid bare my reviews with utmost grit and zest. My presentations enchanting, few words to read, they spoke with urgency through pictures, charts, and reels. As I conclude this session, here's what remember must you. If you want the world to change, the change must start with you. Thank you so much for giving me this time to speak about what is very close to my heart. And with this, I think I can stop sharing the screen and come on the screen.
Thank you, Nandita Ben, for such a wonderful session and the amazing stories that you narrated. So many of them really so impressive, and just your passion flows the way you communicate and the way you narrated the entire session. Amazing. I'm holding back the vote of thanks for a few minutes for people to ask you questions. I'm sure there would be many in the session who would love to know and learn from your personal experiences, your professional experiences. So if anybody has got any question, please raise your hand, and let's make a small queue so that everybody doesn't talk. There's no cross talk. So can we ask the audience to ask questions to Nandita Bain? And I must say, Nandita Bain, that today has been a record count for us. It's topped 120. It's never happened in the past.
Thank you so much.
Amazing. Yeah. I think few of my colleagues want to ask you some questions.
Do I have to do anything for the question or?
No, nothing, nothing,
Oh,
nothing.
okay.
They'll start raising their hands and ask. Yeah, Kaka, please go.
Yeah, I have a question, ma'am. That sometimes we have really difficult questions for the senior management to pose, and tabling them at the audit committee poses challenge for them also to digest and for us to make it presentable. So, how many of such events have happened in your life, and how have you handled it? If you can shed some light, please.
So I would share with you very honestly that it has happened. It has definitely happened more times than I can count on my fingertips. It sometimes bordering on hostility, but that is where I feel that. So there are a few things which I have believed in terms of, because particularly my specialization comes from internal audit. As internal auditors, one has a choice of how we sequence our audits. And I always plan that for a new client, in the first quarter, I take one report, which is a very safe report, where I get an intuitive feeling that everything is hunky-dory, because that is where I want to connect with the audit committee from a space that I am coming with. And then only take up areas where I know that there are likely to be controversies, because when you do your initial meetings, you know where the meat is and where it is a safe ride. For the lot of the other committees, this is my personal experience which I'm sharing. What I found is that the Q3 audit committee is when the internal audit gets maximum attention, because the annual results are over, the AGM is over, the thing. So Q2 and Q3. So I would space my more interesting reports in Q2 and Q3 meetings. Very often request for a special meeting during those times, because what happens is that in the last quarter, if I have very important findings, there is already the last quarter, the finalization is knocking at the door, etc. So it sometimes very good reports get lost. And as I said, that being able to work with the auditee so that we don't present a problem, but we take a jointly worked out solution, that has always worked for me. But yes, there have been times where I have cried at audit committee, but in that very audit committee, the audit committee members understood the space I came from, because in this case, the executive management made some comments which were possibly I was not mature enough to deal with it at that time. But the very next day, the largest bouquet of red roses which I've ever received in my life came from that executive management, as directed by the audit committee. So I think that these are lessons which we must keep in mind. And that is why I emphasize that speaking about something which is uncomfortable, presenting it with some third-party examples of what happened in so-and-so organization, what happened in so-and-so organization, can it happen in our organization? And this is what we have to share. It makes a perspective clear without pointing a finger. So.
Thank you. Thank you.
Great. I think we have Riddhi. Riddhi, you want to ask a question?
Yes, ma'am, I would like to ask something just on the topic of what you mentioned about the knowledge of the business part. So a lot of time we face an issue related to when audit is very rigid and saying that they have an impression that we being auditors don't know much about the business, and we are commenting on that. And it also becomes difficult to gain entire knowledge of the business, because we also handle multiple assignments. And to when we start with the audit to push that, I would just like to know how can I deal with that, or maybe should I do something which would help me in understanding this?
So I look at it from that what I expect from a general practitioner and what I expect from a specialist. Now, when I go to a specialist, say if I go because I have a fracture. Now, when I go to somebody to resolve my fracture, the least that I expect from him is a general understanding of anatomy, that in trying to correct my fracture, he doesn't damage any other part of my human biological system. So he doesn't give me medicines which will damage my kidneys, or the doctor doesn't fix in a way that my one leg gets fine, but in the process so much load comes on the other leg that the other leg starts having problem. So I think what is expected is there are three things. One is that a general curiosity. So in our organization, not everyone will know every industry. But in the briefing meeting, the person who's most knowledgeable about that industry must brief the team. So that the critical points. And second is understanding that I am a risk and control specialist. So have the humility to ask the auditing, how does this happen in your industry? In other industries, this is how procurement is happening. Or in somewhere else, this is the way cybercrime attack happened, and 2 crores just went out of the bank account. What have you done? When you put actual examples, or as Shailesh Bhai told in his talk, that when you bring stories to the table, there is no you're not creating fear, you are creating curiosity. So if you can replace the client's fear or our own high-handedness with curiosity at the client's end and humility at our end, a lot of problems get solved.
Okay, thank you, ma'am.
Yes, Sahil.
Yeah. Hello, Nandita ma'am. Sahil this side. First of all, thank you for a wonderful presentation. Ma'am, I just had one small query which I recently faced in couple of my audit committees. So, sometime, ma'am, there are observations which are related to the independent directors, and those observations are because of some of their delays due to their secretaries and all. A small example which I would like to give would be a director disclosure statement, which needs to be made in 30 days. Now, if that thing has not been done, it is an audit observation because it is a non-compliance as per Companies Act. Now, with respect to independent director, many of them are at a very senior level, and how to present them in such a report, it's kind of I sometimes feel it's a little bit kind of embarrassing for the directors also to commit on the screen. So how should we deal with such kind of observations? Because those are not related to the company, but those are related to the director themselves.
So I think Josefa Unwala and Nikhil are perhaps in a better position to answer this question. But since you have raised it, what I would say is that, when we look at any non-compliance like this, because it can take a very serious connotation. Sometimes years later also, this is something that was a problem. So there are two things. One is I look at an intent, that if the intent is to ignore this, then yes, it is something that, but normally the reporting on any non-compliance by independent directors, if it is happening to audit committee, I think that itself is a reporting structure anomaly which we need to set right. But more importantly is if you work with the company secretary and say that, look, it is neither in your interest nor in your board's interest to have this observation. Can you send an alert 7 days in advance or 15 days in advance to make sure that your compliance improves? Because that is a positive way of solving the situation permanently. That, And that is how we have worked. That there are, I always say that there are non-compliance which are of 3 categories. One, which doesn't matter, it is a requirement of law, but there are no implications at all. Second is that implication is in terms of a financial penalty or interest on a delayed payment, etc., which you can possibly, the organization has an ability to absorb in case there is a last minute technology failure or somebody fell ill or whatever. But a third category, which is, where the reputation or reputation is at risk, or where the sustainability of the business gets impacted, or the an individual's career, because if there is a problem with one independent director, he will have a problem on every board that the person is sitting on. So these are the ways where we need to be able to bring up a solution which that independent director will take to all his other boards and say, these are the internal auditors who have suggested, and why don't you implement? And at some day he will say, why don't you bring them as an internal auditor here? So that is the proactive way of solving these tricky situations. Go with a solution. Put yourself in the position of an independent director and say how embarrassing it is for me to go to an audit committee and be told this. So these are also, some of these are conversations which you need to get onto a joint call with the independent director prior to this, saying that we will have to necessarily bring this to the forum, but this is how we propose to address. How can we help you in making sure that this doesn't occur again? So that is the stance I would take. Josefa, would you like to add something? I think you're mute. You're on mute.
No, I think perfectly articulated, ma'am. And fortunately, that's the view which I and Sahil have taken multiple times. Even today morning, we were in an audit committee together, and the chairman of the company, we had to make an observation against, and his name appeared. And fortunately, the client was good enough to accept it without making a big noise about it. Yeah, so we certainly, and as you said, in one of the instances I recall with Sahil, we had that private conversation. Sahil, who was a very industrious lawyer, who had missed this out. And after getting his approval through a private conversation, without naming him, I think we put it in the annexure. That is what was decided.
Good.
Thank you, ma'am.
I think we have few more, Tahir and Prerna.
Good afternoon, ma'am. Ma'am, I just wanted to ask one question. I mean, taking cues from the story of the shepherd, which you mentioned. I mean, wherein you have mentioned that we have to articulate something new. I mean, to the client as well as to the audit committee as well as to the board members. Actually, sometimes what I face is that we do data analysis and we give a lot of insights to the management. But we always face an issue that management says, see, this is beyond your audit scope, or you don't go step into the domain of a management audit. Because sometimes we find an issue where the management decision making are questionable, or the certain, I mean, for example, certain product pricing or certain business areas where the management has invested, where based on our analysis, it appears to be not in a proper manner or not in a proper prudence shape. So if we try to suggest something, first of all, that report, we are not able to put it in our report only because the CEO, CFO always put a pressure on us. ये point एक तो आपके scope में नहीं है, and the second thing is that you don't have that expertise of the business. I mean, we know what we are doing. So, ma'am, if you can suggest on how to articulate it in terms of any charts, graph, because we already use a lot of charts and graph even in our internal audit report. But sometimes we face an issue to drop the point or either put that point as suggestions for improvement.
Yes.
So, ma'am, any other way if you can help us out to.
So I think I would agree with the management that what is our domain is to look at compliance with the processes as they have been designed with the risk management framework, etc. I think one mistake that we make as internal auditors, and I have made it several times, so I can honestly admit that there is a certain fee base and a rate at which internal audit services are priced, and there is a very different rate at which advisory services are priced. And we do the work of advisory services at the internal audit fees. Then we need to be very cognizant. So here what happens is that anytime there is a business related observation which you put in a larger forum, nobody likes, that it is like suppose your own leadership team has to give you a feedback, you would not like to hear it in a larger forum. But if they create a one-on-one discussion and tell that you're doing great in these four, but these are the two things which will pull you down, how would you like to address this? Then the response is likely to be far more favorable. So very often in our keenness to impress the audit committee, we take observations to the audit committee which should actually be taken on one-on-one basis at executive management, because at audit committee they will, so if it is a huge error of judgment, you may want to put it as an observation based on facts, etc. But the recommended action, you will have to leave it to them. But if you are able to say that you have solutions which can significantly improve the performance of the business, you need to give a glimpse of it and try to see if that can be converted to an advisory assignment. So don't overload the audit report. So when I say that what are the trends, etc., if you leave it to the external or the macro trends, or as I said, cybercrime, or everybody wants to know about cybercrime, everybody, today everybody is also guarded because every meeting is recorded. Earlier every meeting was not recorded, so the kind of open conversation one could have in audit meetings is also, and you never know that who's separately recording the conversation. So these are also risks which we need to address at a different level. But there are interesting articles in HBR, or our own Richard Chambers writes such interesting blogs. Once in a while, being able to take that blog and share it with. So these are things which create space for interesting conversations. So.
Yes, thank you, ma'am. Thanks. Thank you.
Most welcome.
Yeah, I think we'll take one last question from Prerna. Prerna, please.
Good evening, ma'am. Ma'am, my question is, how should we improvise our reporting skills? Is there any course, or is there any suggestion from you?
You want to improve your reporting? How do you write your reporting?
Yes, yes, ma'am.
Okay, so there are 3 suggestions I will leave you with. The first is, a report is almost always finalized in a hurry. Yes or no?
Yes, ma'am.
You never have the luxury of time. So one of the ways to practice is go back to an earlier report when you have the time and say, if I had the luxury of time, how would I have written it? So that slowly, the report that is written in a hurry becomes a report that you would write when you have ample time. So you have to practice that, if I had the luxury of time, I would have sequenced it differently. I would have got a little different data to present. I would have worded it differently. So that is one thing. Second is that practice is the only way you can improve. So look at not improving your report writing. Look at improving your communication. So whether it is an opportunity to speak, right? If you have a in-house journal, whether it is read interesting blogs, read and try and write. A journalist friend, I have always been very, it's been on one of my items on my wish list has been that I want to write a book, and I want to write a book on articleship, on CA articleship, because there is so little written in an interesting way. So one of my aims at one point was to that the word articleship, because whenever you write articleship, you get that underline below because it is not a dictionary word at all. Right or wrong? So
yes, ma'am, you're right.
I was thinking that the book should create enough understanding of articleship that somebody would incorporate it as part of the dictionary, right? So I asked a journalist friend that how does one go about writing a book? I have so much content, so many stories, so many anecdotes, whatever. So he said there is only one way to become a writer, that never go hungry if you have not written 500 words a day. So the moment you take time to write 500 words every day.
Yes.
On 1 minute, something changed on my screen. So,
Okay.
okay. So if you have the time to write 500 words every day, then that is when you will start improving the way you write. Automatically your vocabulary will expand. Automatically you will be able to write in a crisp way what exactly you want to tell, and then you will be a very sought after member of every team because you will write the best reports. Yeah.
Okay, ma'am. Thank you, ma'am.
Yeah.
I think there would be a lot of questions in the minds of all the members who are participating today, but in the interest of time, and it's nearing 4:30, Nandita madam has already given us about an hour and a half, so I don't want to hold her back, but we will leave her email ID and a presentation copy with everybody so that they are able to correspond with her any point in time. She is very accessible, and she's an amazing human being as we have seen it in the last 1.5 hours. I will just, madam, with your permission, try to relay the key takeaways and messages that you gave us today as our vote of thanks to you.
Sure.
I'm not sure whether I'll be able to do justice to the brilliant stories and the messages that you gave us, but few notings that I've made, and this will stay with me and my team, I'm sure, for their entire life. And the lessons that you have given us today are life lessons as an internal auditor. And the poem that you read out, so much of creativity, so much of passion, and I think it will stay as a life lesson with all of us, and it will really motivate us while we are doing internal auditing. So it will give us that analogy that we are not alone as an internal auditor, and some senior has already gone through this experience and has narrated this poem which will benefit all of us. So I will quickly recap few important key takeaways for the audience what Nandita madam has taught us today. One is that she mentioned several times that to create a deeper impact, the internal auditor should look at the purpose and the objective of the assignment and should look at the why. That is very, very important. So the starting point is why we are doing the internal audit exercise for the client. Second is, she so eloquently mentioned that packaging alone is not enough. You need to have good content coupled with packaging. Content perhaps is the queen, and audit communication to be effective has to match up on both the ends, content as well as packaging. She also taught us how to add value to the boards and to the audit committees by identifying patterns, trends, giving them external insights more than what is there in their books of accounts. The equation of face time with the audit committee has to change if your audit communication is effective. She mentioned very clearly that the face time that we get has to enhance from 5 minutes to 20 minutes. She also shared so many experiences on converting a audit mission into a art and how we can make a difference. Uh, Being fearless and fair. And one punchline was amazing: stop sitting on the fence. I think that is something really amazing, which we will keep it as a lifelong lesson in terms of giving our 100%, being convinced about our observation, not dropping it, and being fearless. She also she also taught us how can we convert a negative finding into a positive one. And the slide on am I fat? The question will come back to us for each audit report, and when we are drafting our audit observations on making them more positive, and writing the report from the reader's perspective, from the auditee's perspective, is something that she spoke about. And then she also gave us a beautiful chart more for the senior managers and the role of the leaders, and of course the partners, on converting knowledge into experience, and from experience joining the dots and giving a creative output to the clients. So these are the few things, and of course, a lot of lessons for HR and for the shared services team in terms of Pictionary and games and Damsheras, and those wonderful insights that you gave us will allow us to come out of our mundane and day-to-day activities, madam. Amazing insights. And we thank you from the bottom of our hearts, and we would love to have you back as a speaker in future on some other topic with your kind permission. With that, I propose a very warm and loud vote of thanks to Nandita madam. I would request all the team members, although we are not gathered together in a hall, so you may not be able to hear the claps, but to the best possible extent, I would request everybody to please join their hands and give a clap to Nandita ma'am.
Thank you so much.
Madam, we
Thank you so
really
much.
enjoyed the session. Thank you for being with us today.
Thank you, and it was a pleasure. Wish all of you well, and very interesting questions. So I'm really glad that we left enough time for that. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you. Thank you, everybody. Bye.